Hello, my name is Mel Holsworth from Holsworth Law & Associates. Welcome to this presentation for Self-Managed Superannuation Fund Trustees for the year ended 3rd of June 2012. Your disclaimer in relation to the advice that I'm about to give is general advice and doesn't take into account your specific circumstances. As you would be aware, the laws change most frequently, and so I'd ask you to seek timely advice before making any decisions in relation to the matters that I go through in this slide presentation. The first area I'm going to talk about relates to investment strategies. There's some draft regulations out right at the moment that have recently been issued that will require most self-managed super funds to update their investment strategy. No longer will it be one of those well-done documents, which is often the case, just a document which is done at the beginning and kind of etched in cement. Here it is, let's put it in a picture frame, that's our investment strategy, and it's never looked at again, nor is it ever adhered to. It's just one of those documents that auditors look for at the end of the year and will measure your investments and your asset classes against that strategy. The new regulation 4.092 requires that every trustee is not only to formulate but to review regularly and give effect to an investment strategy. So what really is a review regularly? What does that actually mean? Give effect means essentially that you will adhere to it, but review regularly, well, that's going to be interesting to see the regularity and how do we prove that trustees have reviewed regularly their investment strategy. So essentially no longer will a cursory or annual review be sufficient. One of the items also to be included in the review is to whether they will hold or should not hold insurance cover. So that's something that has to be put in the new investment strategy. It's currently the practice where a lot of trustees are now bringing their insurance cover within the superannuation fund, but that's now has to be addressed within your investment strategy, the decision whether to include insurance or not. Also in Regulation 8.02b, there's now a need from 2012 onwards that all financial accounts be reported using market value rather than historic value. It's no longer option as it was in the past. We've always, for the last at least 3 or 4 years, completed market value appraisals in the financial accounts. We knew this was coming, and so we started that measure quite a number of years ago. If you need to acquire a new investment strategy, we can supply one, purchased through a well-respected law firm that we're in contact with, or you can see your financial planner. I would advise you this should be done after the laws are passed, just in case there's some final adjustments to it. Remember, at the moment all we have is the draft regulations. That does not necessarily mean that they will be the final regulations. A little bit of an update of what I'm seeing from an investments point of view as an auditor. At this stage there's still no legislation which is binding trustees to a range of investments and percentages within those ranges. But no, it's still available, a very wide range of investment options. Of course, there's some exclude investments, which are the same loans to related parties and families, and gambling or getting involved with illegal activities. What I'm seeing at the moment is a movement around. I guess previously during before the GFC, while the boom was on, there was a lot of people in direct shares and share managed funds. Now I'm seeing less in direct shares. I'm seeing managed funds, which are mostly cash managed funds, or they'll be involved in some property. I'm seeing a lot of cash bonds, fixed term deposits. I'm seeing still have some clients doing some FX trading and options trading. I'm seeing an increased number of super funds buying direct property, both locally and overseas. Still a number of clients involved with collectibles. And of course there's a few loans to non-related entities as well. There's an upswell in direct property investing through limited recourse borrowings, as local property is depressed at the moment and there's some good bargains to be bought. Also a number of superannuation fund trustees like buying property through the NRAS scheme, which gives them basically a good guaranteed rent. Those that own direct property through gearing through a bare trust with limited recourse loans will be interested in the following slides. Just released is a new ruling from the ATO. Most of the industry is happy with the details in that ruling. If you don't have investments into direct property through a trust and limited recourse loan, then the following slides won't really be applicable to you. So the new ruling is SMSF ruling 2012/1, and what it's about is where an asset is acquired through a holding trust with a limited recourse loan. And so it goes into what is an acceptable asset and a single acquirable asset, maintaining or repairing an asset as against improving that asset, and then when is a single acquirable asset is changed sufficiently that it's now a replacement asset. So you'd be aware from previous information that under the regulations you're only allowed to have a single acquirable asset. In these circumstances you can't have multiple assets. If you have multiple assets, then you have to have multiple loans, one loan per asset. So if you've gone and acquired a property, it's deemed to be a single acquirable asset, but you can do some things to that property and improve it in such a way that the improvement's then deemed to be a secondary asset, so you would need another loan. There's some issues been around whether something that you're doing to maintain repair is in fact maintenance, but is it actually improving it? Big issues in relation to natural disasters there with the Queensland floods and bushfires down south in Victoria, etc. And what happens if we do end up with a replacement asset? Are there some circumstances when a replacement asset doesn't breach the legislation? So what's an acquirable asset and a single acquirable asset? Well, it's important as the borrowing provisions are limited in each instance to a single acquirable asset. Simply put, that's not as cut and dry as it looks. For example, a unit that comes with a car park, but they're on separate strata title deeds, or a dwelling whose footprint covers more than one title of land. In other words, it straddles both deeds. It may seem to you to be that this is a simple asset, but in fact sometimes it could be construed that it's not. The ruling gives us clear guidance in these issues with multiple examples, and simply they come down to two underlying tests. Number one is there an unifying physical object attached to an asset which is permanent in nature? And number two, whether under the state or territory laws assets must be dealt with together. So using the example what I had there before, the unit that comes with a car park, even though they're on separate deeds, you'll find under the state and territory laws of Queensland that they must be dealt with together. And so they become a single acquirable asset even though they've got separate deeds. And likewise too with the dwelling whose footprint covers more than one title. There's a unifying physical object attached, in other words the house, which is permanent in nature. Even though it's on two title deeds, the whole asset, two deeds and the house, become a single acquirable asset in those circumstances. If, for example, that the dwelling, the house, was straddling both deeds, but also there was a separate shed over in the corner of one property, or maybe a swimming pool or something else that was detached from the house, then that shed is not captured as a single acquirable asset, but becomes a separate asset, and so there would be a breach under the two tests of that shed. The final ruling has expanded its initial views regarding the need to consider both the legal form and the substance of the acquired asset. However, in regard to both the proprietary rights or the ownership and the object of those rights, it explains that it may be possible for an asset to meet the single acquirable asset definition, notwithstanding that the object of the property comprises of separate bundles of proprietary rights, that is the two or more blocks of land, which was in the example I gave before. So it gives us some clear guidelines as to what is allowable and what's not allowable, and once again we have lots of examples. I guess the to-do point in this for you is to recognise that if you're going to buy a property, you really need to talk to us first to make sure that it's going to meet the single acquirable asset definitions and the rules. Otherwise you'll be in all sorts of strife. The second area deals with what's a repair as against what's an improvement. So the Commissioner was widely criticised before on his previous stance in this regard. As you would remember, a repair is allowable, but improvements are not allowable. So borrowed money under a limited recourse borrowing arrangement can be applied to carrying out repairs and maintenance as required on an asset that's been purchased. For example, you've bought a property and the split-mounted air conditioning units are in the property. One of them, has problems with it or may even need to be replaced. It's okay to repair that air conditioning unit and replace it with another one of similar size and similar capacity. Improvements must not be funded from borrowings, though. They can be funded from contributions or other cash that the superannuation fund has, but improvements cannot be funded through borrowing money. So it begs the question then, so what's a repair and what's an improvement? So what's a repair? I guess it's a common sense approach, but it can become complicated, especially if large-scale repairs are required or replacements are needed. In the example, if the house burns down, or if the flood makes the house, major repairs are done on the house due to flood or cyclone, or even a bad tenant that's come in and trashed the place. You may even have a large amount of repairs and replacements done under an insurance policy, and so there's no payment being made, it's just covered totally insurance. There's a number of tests that we look at here, but certainly the major test is whether or not the effect of the repair has significantly enhanced the state or the function of the asset. And that's a big one, significantly enhance the state. So replacing one air conditioning unit with another more up-to-date air conditioning unit is fine, but if you rip out all the air conditioning units and then install a new ducted air conditioning system, well, that would certainly significantly enhance the state or function of the asset or of the house. Sometimes we see, what if the whole house is replaced? Well, we need to be careful there. Generally, though, insurance companies would not be replacing the burnt-out previous house with a new house which was significantly enhanced. It'll do like for like as best as possible. Certainly, we don't expect you to replace one kitchen with another kitchen with old appliances or using old. You can certainly enhance it by using more up-to-date materials, but just be very careful. Watch for improvements such as adding pergolas or adding a swimming pool or even adding a second story to the property. These definitely are improvements. Okay, it's okay to repair your pergola, or it's okay to do effect repairs to your swimming pool, but putting in a brand new pool when there wasn't one there before, or adding a pergola when there wasn't one before, or adding a second story is definitely improvements. Sometimes we also need to be careful to not create a separate asset. So we may have a large property of land and then we subdivide that land. That's actually creating a second asset, so that's not allowable. There's even an example there where someone has bought a house and that house was zoned where it could be converted to a restaurant. That is also classified as an improvement, and it's not allowed. I guess there's no problems with anyone provided the following is adhered to. That's in relation to people buying off the plan. That's happening a lot now. It's always happened, but now the Commissioner has put it in place in such a way that we have protection, whereas before it was an interpretation. So number one, the construction of the building, the house or the unit, and the title registration must happen before settlement. And that stands to reason. I don't know too many people who do a final settlement when the title deed hasn't even come about. Especially if you're borrowing, the there's going to be a mortgage affected over that title deed. So I think point 1 is a given. Number 2 is an interesting one though. A deposit paid and a balance. The payment is due upon completion. So that's okay. You put down your deposit, you pay your final amount at completion. No progress payments in the middle though. So the builder has to carry the cost of the build to the very end. You can't make progress payments on the build, because each time you make a progress payment you're actually creating an asset. So that's not doable. What if the trustees are builders and can effect repairs or do a spec home for the super fund? Is this allowable? Well, the answer is yes and no. If the trustees, for example, can go in and effect repairs, replacing the air conditioners, as I said before, with new ones, or do some plumbing or what have you, then that's fine. But you just need to talk to me about charging your own labour fee to the superannuation fund. It is also possible for a self-managed superannuation fund to have its trustees, through their own company, build the spec home, but there are some fairly concise regulations relating to you doing that. But I'm just planting the seed that if any of you are out there are builders or tradespersons and you want to effect your own repairs or improvements to the properties, can you talk to us first before you go doing that? That's about all I want to talk about on these subjects. Thank you for listening.